What's up, studs and honeys? Welcome to episode 4 of the Ardor and Grit Experience. Our guest this episode is an unstoppable force in his pursuit for greatness. Brian Bonino, former Division I wrestler, Columbia University undergrad, Drexel MBA, and a force in the financial sector. Brian shines a light on how he is dominating his life with purpose. Brian sets the stage with his charisma and unravels his truth about what it means to relentlessly go after what you want, the importance of powerful role models, establishing a standard of discipline, and much more. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's extend a warm welcome to Brian Bonino. You want to give us your little brief overview on who you are, what you're about, what you're doing, how you're killing it?
Sure. All right. So I'm Brian Bonino, born and raised in Paramus, New Jersey, and I spent pretty much all my time in the same house. I grew up. I'm Italian and Irish. Big influences from the Italian side of my family. Off the boat Italians when my grandparents came here with my dad. And, that immigrant mentality, blue collar family, that blue collar conditioning. So, brought up in a stricter household, but everything was good. I played football, baseball, and wrestling my whole life. Sports have always been a big factor in my life. Yeah, going through it all, I played in the Little League World Series. And when I was in baseball, I stopped playing baseball in high school, focused on football and wrestling, and then ultimately just focused on wrestling in college. I was fortunate enough to get into Columbia University, and that's where I also decided to continue wrestling in college. And then went through a gap year where I took some time off, started to work, and all that jazz. And that gap year actually rolled into that COVID year, so that was when I got that extra year of eligibility, parlayed that into a grad school year MBA, when got to wrestle at Drexel. That's where me and lovely Sean rekindled our relationship. And man, now I moved to Texas, and I got a job out here, and it's going. I'm 2 months in now, but yeah, I guess what I'm about is just hard work, persistence. I've got that. I'm a big just proponent to keep your head down and just grind. It's one of those things where it's. I used to love it. My dad would always used to say, like, it's like, the saying where I guess people are just like, oh, like, man, like, oh, like, how are you doing? And then, the common response is like, oh, like, no complaints here. But, my dad would always be like, if someone was like, oh, like, how you doing? He'd be like, yeah, like, no complaints. And even if I had any, nobody would listen. So, I think that's the mentality that you got to go with, man. No one's going to listen to your complaints. You just gotta keep your head down and grind. And that's kind of how I've done it my whole life.
Yeah, 100%. Excuses are off the table.
Oh yeah,
that's what defines a winner, right?
Hell yeah.
You're an absolute dog too, man. Putting all the hard work in. One of the most disciplined people I've ever met. So that's a beast mode thing right there.
That's right.
So when you were working, so we'll start off simple. So wrestling has been like your foundational sport since you started, right?
Yep. Yeah, 7 years old, second grade started.
All right, same here. So want to break down that transition on how you got into the sport of wrestling, why wrestling, and when you started figuring out that wrestling was the sport you wanted to commit to.
Yeah, so funny. My dad didn't wrestle growing up, so it wasn't like a sport that was kind of just like I was going to try it no matter what. I was under the impression that wrestling was, when I was a kid, around like 6, 7 years old. I was under the impression that wrestling was going to be a lot more like WWE. And I was originally disappointed after my first wrestling practice when I was a kid. But beyond that, actually, my dad was big in supporting me, like going to wrestle when I was like 7 years old, because he had other friends in the town that had their kids in the wrestling program. So my dad thought it would be a sport that would teach good discipline, and he thought it would be a sport that didn't have anything. I wasn't really doing anything during that season, so my dad was kind of just like, let's book him up for the whole year of just sports, so he doesn't even have time to fuck around and goof off. So I think that was my parents' mentality. It was either going to be wrestling or the other sport at that season's like basketball, and I was a short fat kid. Basketball was not going to work for me, man. But That transition was cool. I'll actually never forget the coach, the rec coach at the time was this guy Al Nadera, who's like a little Filipino guy. And Al had a kid who was wrestling in high school who was my sister's age. My sister's a little older than me, and he was a really good high school wrestler. And Al was a great coach, man. He was like just perfect. He was for the kids, was really helpful with working with everybody, and that transition to wrestling was tough. I remember as a kid, I didn't like it at all. It was hard. Practices were even hard even as a kid, and I really hated actually the like aspect of like match wrestling. It really stung when you were a kid because it's one of those sports where if you won or lost, or if you're winning or losing, you're either getting dominated or you're doing the dominating. And I remember my first match. It was at Riverdale, and I lost to I don't remember the kid's name, but I lost because I clasped 3 times and I got disqualified when I was in second grade. And I remember like crying my eyes out because you got to have this kid's hand, the kid's hand gets raised right in front of you, and that's like that's kind of impactful for like a little kid. It's basically like it's just straight like rewarding, victory, and I think that plays a lot into I think everybody that does wrestling, I think it has to impact you some way in growing up. It's just and that's kind of where I guess subconsciously you start realizing the correlation between hard work and rewards. It's one of those sports where you get what you reap what you sow. You put in and you get out pretty much almost identical things. If you don't want to put in your work, you're not going to get the results you want. But that transition, moving on up, I actually tried to quit wrestling multiple times when I was in like elementary school and middle school. And my dad just like wouldn't let me. He was like, no, like you're not a quitter. Like you could do this. And I hated losing so much. I cried after every match that I lost, probably up until like sixth grade, like something embarrassing. And like even then, it's still cry in like spare amounts like after that. But middle school was rough. I started off okay, and then around like fifth, sixth grade, other people were hitting puberty, and I just was not, and I was still a little short, pudgy, fat kid, and everyone was passing me up. And I got to seventh and eighth grade, and I'd placed in states, rec states every year before that, and then my last 2 years, seventh and eighth grade, I didn't place in states, and it was like really going into high school on a low point. So I got into high school and I didn't try, I just didn't register for wrestling my freshman year of high school. And then our assistant coach at the time, Chris Filato, if you remember the big jacked guy, he
Yeah, he's the
came
man.
he came over to like my house and he told my dad, he's like, oh, like Brian's not like registered for wrestling. Like, are you wrestling? My dad, I see going to come out this year. And my dad was like, like I don't think wrestling's for him, man. Like, it's just doesn't seem like it's working out. And he was just like, oh, come on. Like, we could really use him. Like, I think he'll be fine. Like, I'll work with him, like, all this stuff. And Filato was truthful about that, though. That was, I came out for wrestling, and Filato actually would take, I went to Retro Fitness in Paramus when it was still there. And I would go work out after school with Chris Filato, this big jack dude. And I was like this pudgy little like 14-year-old, and this guy like really would. He would help me work out. We'd lift weights, all that stuff. I started out wrestling 145 as a freshman, and I was kind of like a sacrificial lamb. I think like if you look back at like if you would look back at like the records, I want to say I was like 8-24 as a freshman. Like I just got the shit kicked out of me all the time as like a 145 pounder, and I didn't make it out of districts. It was just brutal, and I was like, but it was like okay because we had a really great team. Paramus was a really good wrestling school, so it was fun to be a part of something like that. Sophomore year was I moved up to 160, and still struggling but getting better. I don't even think I finished above 500 my sophomore year, but I was still lifting more. My body was changing a little bit. I think I was going through a growth spurt. And then I think I still finished below 500, but I made it to regions. And then going into my junior year was when everything changed. I went from 160 to 195 and, like fully hit puberty and was really hitting the weights. And I think, that just transitioned at everything, more confidence, more everything. And that was, I would say, junior year was really when I found out like wrestling was going to be for me. And, after that, it was like, that was, when I really went full in. That's when I committed to everything, like the eating better, the working harder, the working out more often, the, doing the extra stuff at like the club practices and all that. And it really, it transitioned. I think I made it to states as a junior, like round of 16 or whatever. But after that was when, I kind of like really was like, all right, like wrestling is going to be the sport for me. I threw football by the wayside and, just was really all about wrestling. And yeah, I think that's like the transition from there was big.
100%, dude. And the support system definitely what kicks up the motivation to make you stick with it. Because when I was younger, dude, I always was in a contradictory state. Was, do I want to do this? Getting your ass kicked sucks, especially when you're a little chubby fat kid and you're not that athletic. And you see all these little dudes moving around like maniacs. You're like, what am I doing wrong? I'm not getting the results I want.
It was
Yeah,
rough growing up with that, man. It's like it's good and bad. I think it all depends on the kid, because there are kids that'll take something like that and it could ruin them, and then there's some where it's like they rise to the occasion. And I actually think I was the former. I don't think I took it well at first when I was a kid. I don't I don't think I was rising to the occasion. I think I was really like sulking in like those defeats and like getting my ass kicked. It was kind of like, realistically, like if it wasn't for like my dad being like as adamant as he was, is like like you're not a quitter, like I really don't know if I would have stuck with wrestling. I think it was that hard for me. And I think that speaks like volumes to like to how people view other people from like an outside perspective. You might think someone's an absolute badass and wow, they're so motivated, they did this on their own, but you don't know who they had in their corner that helped them. That's why it's important to get life stories out of people. But yeah, realistically, it was tough for me growing up. I really did not like wrestling at all. If you told like my third through eighth grade, if you said like, hey, like you're going to be doing wrestling until you're 23, 24 years old, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. You're a liar. I hate this. I'm never like, as soon as I can stop this, I'll never do it again. And then now here I am, now I'm 24 and officially done with all of my competitive wrestling. And I would give anything to go back and get one more year. But it's crazy. Dude. It's crazy.
Yeah, your support system really hunkers you down. Like you said, you see these like kids tearing it up on the mat, and that's the whole individual aspect of the sport, is like their time to show up. But there's so much going on behind the scenes. Like my dad was the biggest anchor for me committing to the sport. Like I said, I was in a constant or perpetual state of contradiction, and I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was playing football, wanted to have a social life, wanted to hang out with girls, the whole nine. But my dad was really checking me with my priorities. He's like, if you want to be great at something, you need to fully commit.
Yeah.
And that's like the best thing about the sport, is having that support system.
I wanted to hang out with girls, but they didn't want to hang out with me. I was way too fat. It's tough to have a parent or someone in your life like nail down that premise of like you want to be good at something. Like this is like, you can't just be doing 30 other things at once. Like you've got to focus on this one thing.
What are some of the things that your dad really harped on to make you want to become committed to the sport?
It was
even coaches.
My coaches really like, I think the coaches were big. Between like Damian Logan was an interesting coach. I don't know. I mean, he was just like he was more like a technical like wizard guy. And I guess like I kind of like Damien made me want to be good at wrestling through like just like what he'd show. Like I don't know, like watching Damien wrestle, like, he was so fluid, and it was like that made me want to get to that point of wrestling where I looked like that, where people would look at me and be like, wow, like this guy's like a fluid wrestler. He's really good. He knows his positions, everything like that. But in terms of what made me want to be just a good wrestler, it was really like Filato. That guy was a badass. Like he was jacked. He was a shredded, ripped, like 200 pounds. And I was like this short, like fat, like 160, 190-pound kid, in those years. And it was just like, I was like, damn, I want to be this guy. And if he loves wrestling this much and wrestling like got him to here, like shit, like where can it get me? Like that's where I want to be. And he was just a man. He was just like a dude's dude. He was a guy's guy. Like he was a badass. That's like when I think of a badass and I like where I want to like envision myself as being, like I still am like, I'm not even like sniffing the ground that like Coach Filato, Chris Filato like walked on. Like that dude was the man. And that was kind of my like whole inspiration behind it. I loved that guy. I wanted to be like him. And if wrestling was what got him there, I just had to follow those footsteps. And, I just wanted to be better than him too at the same time. So that was kind of a
Yeah.
big like hunkering for me for wrestling. But in terms of my dad just is like, my dad did, so like I said, he didn't wrestle, so there wasn't really an overlap there, which was like interesting, but my dad still to this day watched and watches more wrestling than I do. My dad like loves it. And it really wasn't anything that had to do with wrestling. It was just my dad is just such a committed guy, and like everything he does in like the right way. Like I said, like my dad was the one that wouldn't let me quit. And it's the same concept as like, my dad was my dad was in the utilities workers union for 40 years. He worked, one job for 40 years. And he worked an outdoor union job at like a water treatment plant. And like, dude, I went there. That place smells like shit. Literally, it's a water treatment plant. He's outside half the time, and the freezing cold. And when there's like something like a blizzard or something, he's got to like stay overnight at the plant. And it's like he had every reason to like complain or like hate his life or do anything or just try to go somewhere else. And it's just my dad is the biggest like stick through kind of guy. My dad does not complain. My dad, knows what he has to do and does his work. And that's just the way it is. And, my dad was just fully gung ho and supporting me in whatever I wanted to do. And he really wanted to see me succeed. He didn't want to see me fail and he didn't want to see me upset, obviously, but he didn't want to see me quit more than anything else. Because I guess, at the end of the day, he knew that this could be something great for me. And, I'll thank him every day for how right he was. But that was the biggest thing that my dad gave me. It was just, you got to see things through. And if at that point you're going to see them through, you might as well do a good job in doing it. You're not going to half-ass, you're not going to half-ass something that you just are going to, you're going to go all the way through with. That's just, you're going to waste your time. And, it'd be like, I'll be damned if I waste my time. That was like another thing. Yeah. Like, my dad always said, he'd take me to a tournament and it'd be like, I'd be damned if I'll waste my time, but I'll be damned if you waste my time. Like it's just one of those things, dude. If you're going to do it all the way and don't stop.
Well, wrestling dads especially, and knowing your dad personally, his whole thing was he had like a purpose behind it. He wants the best for you, obviously. Any dad wants the best for you. And they're willing to pour all the resources, time, effort, money into that kid for him to reach his max potential. Every parent wants their kid to be great, but they see something that you're capable of doing without you realizing it at a young age.
Yeah.
And making you harp on that narrative and commit, that's the fulfilling part for them, is the effort and the investment that they put in you. And my dad was the same exact way. He poured all his time, resources, and effort into me and Mickey just so we could find greatness in our own sense. And we always fought him thinking like, oh, maybe wrestling's not the way. But he allowed us to open up that door and see like there's a lot of potential here.
Yeah.
And especially surrounded, like you talked about Damien, but it putting us in Apex, shout out Apex Wrestling. Those dudes were the standard. Like you got Eric and Damien and Alex Karninski. Those guys were absolute badasses, and they were great role models for us to live through. Because you see these dudes, like Norgard, for example. Eric Norgard went to Columbia. Was he a little inspiration for you to go there too?
Yeah, man. I did. He wasn't. He was kind of, he went on his little like coaching hiatus kind of around the time we were looking to we were looking for colleges. But I got in contact with Norgard, and I mean, I know he helped me with like the process and like things they wanted to see and things that they wanted their like applicants to do. And yeah, absolutely a huge impact, dude. I mean, the guy was an absolute stud in high school. I mean, what, 4-time state finalist and like 2-time champion. And the one year he didn't, one of the years he didn't get a state championship was only because he was injured. Like, and I mean, this dude like wanted to go to Columbia. So it was like, I knew like the recipe was there, man. And it's just, you just got to replicate it. And I think Eric is, I think he's a great dude. And I mean, beyond that, I mean, MBA from Rutgers. Now he works in, I think, what is he, global equity now? I mean,
Something like that.
he's an absolute all-star. And now he's come back to coach now that he's like got his whole, he's has his kids, and they're a little more like, him and the wife and the kids are all like self-sufficient now. He's coming back to coach wrestling again. Like how much of a fucking badass is that guy? Like, he's the fucking
Man, he's
man.
the man. Yeah, and the one cool thing being surrounded with, like, especially Apex, I think the one thing that really hit home with me, especially when reflecting back on it now, is the system that they brought through their club. Like, you
Yeah.
go to like when you were doing privates with Eric, you would do your 9-tailed series,
Yeah.
right? And it was like it was a progression to an outcome. It's like you have 9 different alternatives for you to get bonus points. With Damien, it was his movement, his hand fighting, and his positional techniques, and it was all a system to get you what you wanted.
Yeah.
And like, looking back on it now, anytime you're on a road to success, there's always a system that's going to get you there. And then on top of it, what they also harped on was a standard. Like, you got to be a tough kid. You got to set the tone. You got to be aggressive. You got to go
Yeah.
out there to be a winner. And they would break all that down for you, and you had an execution plan to find that success that you wanted.
Yeah.
So when you were going through high school and then making that transition into college, what were the systems, like, mentally, physically, performance wise, that you kind of started defining for yourself when you really started to get to the results? Because your senior year took third in the state, right?
Yeah.
And then you had you have a phenomenal story, which we'll hash on after this, about you getting into college, into
Yeah.
Columbia. You want to break that down?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, going from like what changed that senior year that was when, so, bringing up back to that time of like, like when I loved it and when I committed. I'd say those moments are pretty like near simultaneous, or at the same time. And it definitely happened my junior year. And it was like, it was after states my junior year, and I had just lost. And you're just sitting there, and I wasn't upset because I actually didn't really know what I expected from that season. But, I remember I was just sitting there, and then also at the time, high school coach for Premise was Matt Ulrich, who, another great guy. I'm sitting there, and I had Ulrich and Filato come, and they sat next to me, and, we were just rehashing on the year, and they're talking, and they're like, yep, like, this is great. Kyle Cochran was going to wrestle in the state finals that year. He's going to wrestle against Justin Beardumful, who's, another, like, a 3-time finalist at the time. Now it was, that was his 4th time in the state finals. Kyle had lost to him 2 times already. And I remember sitting there with the coaches, and I was like, oh, like, yeah, like, how's Kyle doing? He's in the back getting ready, like, da da da. They're like, yeah, like, he's doing good. We're here to talk about you, recapping the season, da da da. And that wasn't even the conversation that did it. Ulrich and Filato went to go get up to go help Cochran. And I'm sitting there, and I was like, oh, like, Ulrich, like, well, what do you think? Like, he just lost to Justin twice, like, literally back to back, like, 2 weeks in districts and regions. And Ulrich is just sitting there, and he goes, no, I know he's going to win. And I was like, what do you mean? He goes, he's like, I've seen the work that Kyle puts in. He's like, and I know he's going to win. And Ulrich is a straight shooter. And he's like, I'll tell you what, he goes, if you put in that work too, he's like, I'm sure I'd know you'd win too. And it was just like that, like, little, like, that moment of just talking with them and those things was like, that was when I knew I had to be committed if I wanted to be a success. Because how cool is that to have someone have that much confidence in you? And lo and behold, Kyle won. So it's one of those things where if you have that body of work and people know that you're going to be successful, like, that was where I wanted to be. I wanted people to know that I was like, but like Thanos, like, I was inevitable. Like, I wanted to be that. I wanted to be inevitable, that I was going to win. And going into that senior year, things that changed, like, when I was committed, I mean, I was doing the extra stuff. I stayed after practice every single day. And I mean, and this was something that Ulrich did with me and Cochran, and we would stay after practice every day, and we had like these like 2 songs that we'd play every day, and we would literally just do suicide sprints wall to wall for the duration of the songs. And then we'd hang those up, and then we'd do 10 minutes of just an extra like stance and motion, or we do like stance and motion things. And then we do like, mat returns, escapes, like the hard stuff that like you didn't harp on during practice, like things that didn't really come up a lot. and we would just do those for, extra time after practice. And it was just, it just became like habitual. And then it was like, it wasn't a practice unless I finished with those things and did the extras. And another thing that was big was like journaling and keeping track of like my mental of like where I was at. When we had great tournaments that year, we went to Beast of the East. I placed at Beast of the East that year. We went to Escape the Rock. We did as much of the bigger things as we could to try and get us prepped for that. And I remember going into states fully thinking that I was going to win like states. I was fully convinced in my head. It was also one of like the stranger things where like I like knew I was going to win states. That's the only way I could put it. Like I completely wholeheartedly thought I was going to win states, and I was like a 7th seed. I wasn't even like a crazy high seed, and I was so convinced that I was better than everybody in the bracket. I didn't think there was anybody that could beat me. And then I got in the quarterfinals, and I was wrestling Chad Watt from Woodstown, and I was up like 3-2 with 20 seconds left maybe. And I know exactly how it happened, but I just remember I lost. I got taken down like 20 seconds left, and he rode me out, and I just remember like laying on the mat, and like the ref's like, "Hey, you got to get up," and I was like, "Just give me a minute, like fuck you." I was I was like, I wasn't even pissed at that point yet. I was shocked, and then walking off the mat, I I freaked out. I've never done anything like that in my life. Like crying after a match is one thing. I remember I freaked the fuck out. It was funny. I went like backstage, and it's like a convention center. So I went backstage, and there was like, I don't know, like construction stuff going back there. Like there was a bucket full of like construction hats and stuff. And I remember like going in there, and I just took everything back there, and I started throwing shit. Like I just started literally freaking out, throwing shit like a toddler tantrum. And a convention center guy comes back there. He's like, "Hey, like, stop that, or you're gonna get kicked out." I was like, "Fuck you! I don't want to be here." And I like, what? I remember I walked out, and I walked back to hotel. I walked out. I walked down the boardwalk in my singlet and shoes back to the hotel. I didn't even take anything off, and I laid down in the hotel. And obviously, I had to go wrestle in like an hour or like 2 hours or something. And no one could get like I didn't have my phone. No one was getting in contact with me or anything like that. I remember Filato came to the room, and he was like, "Get your ass up right now! Like you're about to be on the board." Da da da. And I told him I don't want to wrestle. I was like, I'm done. I was like, I don't want to finish the tournament. I was like, I came here to win. I was like, I can't win anymore. I was like, I don't want to wrestle. And being like a little baby, like all that. And through, I had a conversation with Filato, and then I was talking to him for like 5 minutes, and then actually my mom and dad showed up at the room. He called them to try and get me out of my funk. And I think it was talking to my mom and dad, and it just, that really woke me up. Like trying to put, like, representing them. That's where it comes down to. At the end of the day, I'm not just representing myself. I represent a standard of like my family, my parents, and to me, it's like especially my dad. Like how would that look to everybody else if it's like Brian Bonino did this? Like, oh, like man, his parents let him do this, or man, Bobby, but like I didn't want that reflection on them. They're raised me so much better than that. I remember I made it down to the match on like last call, like and they're like Brian Bonino to Matt 6 or whatever. I made it down on like last call, and then that was it. That was like my round of 12 match, and I won, and then wrestled all the way back for third, and it was actually cool. Third place, the kid I lost to in the quarters ended up losing in the semis, and I got to wrestle him again for third, fourth, and I beat him like 6-1 for third. So got a little redemption, which obviously, still to this day, I wish you always wish you won states, but it was nice to get the redemption back because, I knew I was better than that guy. You're wrestling scared at that point. And, I think that was another eye opener, not to wrestle scared anymore and just try to go get it, because really what do you have to lose at the end of the day? But, that was like, where I committed. And that was that, transition of really being committed at the end of high school and then on my way into college. But oh yeah, and then the college thing is interesting too.
You said some pretty cool things, and it was like, anybody who wants to be first must be last. They must be a servant to their purpose.
Yeah.
at the end of the day. And you had a huge transition from figuring out, like with your conversation with Ulrich, seeing his confidence in Cochran, Kyle, and you realizing that if I put in the work, if I commit to this, and if I buy into the system that they're preaching in this room, I'm going to get the result that I want for myself, state champ. Although
Yeah.
you didn't get it, you strived with the intent for that purpose. And the other really cool thing you talked about was your parents. Like shit hits the fan when you're in the moment of your pursuit. And when shit hits the fan, understanding who you're doing it for, who you love, and who has the best intention in your mind is the biggest reality check. Like
Yeah.
whenever I was fucking up and I saw my dad in the stands, that was like, this is why I'm doing it. I need to
Yeah.
keep control. I need to own my circumstance, and I just need to be there for I'm representing the people that I love. At the end of the
Yeah.
day, it's me who's doing the action, but there's a community of individuals that have poured the time into me, poured the love and effort into me, and I have to do this for them.
So that's crazy. You know how some people, so that's like a crazy thing to me too, is you know how some people like, I think that there's two schools of thought here where people are like, people believe that like you're strongest in your conviction, like when you're doing it for yourself or like when you're self-motivated, self-driven, like, you know what I mean? Some people like, and that's a solid school of thought. I'm not in that like school of thought. I really, and like, my dad will still say like, no, like you did this for you. Like I'm telling you, like I loved wrestling and I really did, absolutely do. But for whatever reason, like when I competed, like I was wholeheartedly like competing like for my dad. Like for whatever weird reason in my head that registered, like I didn't feel like I was doing those things for myself. Like my dad at the matches. My dad can't even watch the matches. He's like pacing up and down, like wherever in the rafters where no one can see him. He's doing weird shit. He's got a pit stain that goes down to here. Like, and it's just one of those things. Like when, like, I had somebody that cared about me so much. Like, how do I not want to perform the best for them? And it was like, I think that made me stronger in my wrestling and made me like my conviction even stronger. Was it? Obviously I'm doing it for myself. You want to be successful in your sport and in your own right, but I was really there was always in the back of my head or even at the front of my mind, it was like I was doing it like for my dad. I loved competing and winning and doing well for him. That was like my like huge driving force. And like I'll tell you what, I think without my mom and dad coming to see me in Atlantic City, like when I was ready to quit, like I don't know if Falata would have got me back on the mat. I don't know. And it's one of those things where it's just like that's my bigger driving conviction. It's for myself, but it's for my dad, it's for my parents, it's for representing them the right way. Like I want, there's nothing better than shared success, and I felt like when I succeeded, they felt the success, and I just loved that.
Yeah, well, you were courageous for the people that supported you. And
Yeah.
I felt, because I agree with that train of thought, is people want to take a self-interested approach to it and like, I need to be the best. I need to do this for
Yeah.
me because I'm going to prove myself wrong, which isn't a bad train of thought.
No.
But at least how I view it was I felt if I directed all my effort towards myself, I capped my potential
Yeah.
because there's always a
Yeah.
projection higher
Yeah.
than you.
Perfect.
It was like we have like wrestling in college. You have a team of guys that support you, love you, care about you, spend all your time with. And you go out on the mat to get the results that you want, to beat an All-American or to be nationally ranked or whatever the result is. But you have this core group of guys that you spend every ounce of effort with and time with. And at the end of the day, you're stepping on the mat because they're the people that you care about. You want to set the tone. You want to be the example
Yeah.
for the people that are in your network.
Yeah.
So when you were going into college or figuring out that transition to go into college, you have an awesome story. I remember talking about it last year with you. Want to hash out your high school to college transition, how you made that commitment, why Columbia, and how everything panned out?
Yeah, actually, so kind of interesting. As much as I loved wrestling, I actually did apply to schools too that I wasn't going to wrestle at. I was kind of, so what, wrestling ends in March for us, and then we've got April, May, June of just doing whatever we wanted. I guess like after like states that year, I got, you get like a senior in high school, I got to like, you get to party a little bit, got to have fun, and you got a little taste because I didn't really do much during high school. I always had football or wrestling or just something to do. So I got like a little taste of like the party life, and I was like, huh, like man, college could be really fun. It's just even bigger parties like this. So I ended up applying to a mixed bag, but most of the schools I applied to for wrestling were Division 3. I didn't really have that background coming out of junior year that had like Division 1 schools wanting to recruit me. So that junior year though, we went to Columbia Junior Day together. I remember we saw each other, and that was
Yeah.
pretty much like the only like Division 1 school that even like had me like even on their radar. And we went to Junior Day, and that was when Columbia announced their coaching transition. So they went from they had this old staff that all left, and they hired a brand new staff. And that was when they announced it. Was when we were on our Junior Day. So then I went in September. Coach Tonelli followed up with me, and he gave me a call, and we were talking about it, and he actually ended up telling me that he thought they were taking their recruiting in another direction, and they were kind of done recruiting me. So
Mm.
I was like, all right, well, I'm not getting into Columbia without any help, so that was just a school off of my list. So I was applying to D3 schools. Like Stevens Tech was my number one school that I was pretty much going to go to after that. And that was like wrestling. But other than that, I applied to like UCLA, Clemson, um, schools like Northeastern, NC State. I just wanted to, that was it. At that point, at that stage of the game, it was just kind of one of those things. I didn't think wrestling was for me. And I didn't know if I had the commitment to just be doing D3 wrestling, if that makes sense. I didn't know if I wanted to do that. And then so December 20th, 21st is Beast of the East. So we went down to Beast of the East, and like I said, I placed in Beast of the East. And in the quarterfinals, I wrestled Brandon Key, who was like Columbia's like number one recruit, like coming into that year. He was also going to Columbia. And I wrestled Brandon Key to like a 5-4 match, and it was a good match. I mean, I didn't really have a chance to win, but I wrestled really well. I got a takedown on him, and it was a good match. And actually, it's funny. I got a text from Tonelli on my phone that said, "Did you watch Bonino Key? Pretty interesting." And he sent that text to me, not probably like obviously meaning to send it to someone else. And I remember I responded, and he never responded after that. I was like, "Oh, I think you sent the wrong text," and he never responded after that. But I want to say it's December 26th, or maybe on Christmas. I don't remember which day exactly. But then I got a call from Tonelli, and he was like, "Hey man, like you sent in your application?" And I was like, "No, what are you talking? Like sending my application?" I was like, "You said you were taking it a different route. Like I didn't apply anymore. I don't have a chance to get in. Like without any help." It's like, "Oh well, we've had a little change in like the upper weights we're recruiting. Like I think we might have a spot for you." He was like, "Wait, let me give you a call back." So he hung up. He called me back, and he goes, "All right." He goes, "We don't have a specifically allocated spot." He was like, "But I can get you a preferred walk on, like notice on your application." He was like, "If you want to apply." And I was like, I mean, yeah, I'll take it. Like I got to apply now, but with those Ivy League schools and the larger academic schools, they have all those supplemental questions that you have to write, and their applications were closing December 30th. So I was like, I'm in panic mode at this point. I was like, dude, I got to write and I got to write them well. I can't just throw shit in there. I got to write these supplementals. Like I'm panicking. And, shout out to, one of my best friends, Dominic Mandarino, who, he wrestled at Stanford, another smart kid, Don Bosco, state finalist. He applied to Stanford early decision and got in. So that was like, that was his school right away. He had all these supplementals written for the other Ivy League schools if he planned on applying. And, being just, the best friend that he is, he was like, dude, he's like, just take my supplementals. And he wrote them with like a tutor, and he had someone like help him write them. So, not technically plagiarism. I'm not going to admit that there because they weren't published or submitted, but I borrowed ideas from a friend.
Mm.
And so I submitted that application, and regular decision, and that was it. It was just up in the air, and I really didn't think twice about it. I submitted it like December 29th, whatever. Didn't think twice about it. Months go by, and March is usually like people get it like all their acceptances back. So I was getting all my decisions back from schools. I didn't get into UCLA, sadly, but I got all the other acceptances. I got like Clemson, NC State, Northeastern, Boston College, Stevens Tech. I think I applied to like Gettysburg and I don't know, a few other like D3 schools for wrestling. And Stevens was my number one pretty much. And if you wait too long on those decisions, so I had academic scholarships to pretty much all those schools, and if you wait too long on those decisions, those scholarships get taken pretty much. They can't offer them. So I'm pretty much waiting for Columbia's decision at least, because if I get in, I'm gonna go. And all these schools are starting to pull their academic money that I was going to get. And I'm waiting, and Stevens is like, the Stevens coach is kind of on my ass. He's like, dude, we need to know now. He's like, I can't hold the money for you that long. Like, it's gonna go. And I kind of like, being immature and 17 at the time, I kind of just like ghosted him because I didn't know what to do. And he just texted me one day and he goes, the money's gone. Like, if you want to come, you can come. Like, I'm sorry I tried. Like, you're not talking to me, whatever. And pretty much at that point, like I said, blue collar family. My dad's a union worker. My mom's a preschool teacher. I couldn't afford to go to those schools without any help. So, it's kind of looking more or less like a community college 2-year route for me at this point. And I got nothing. And so April 1st rolls around and I'm in class. I'm in like, I don't know, like AP Psych or something. And I got a call from Tonelli and I missed it. So I went to the bathroom and I go to get the call. And he's like, "Hey man, like, how you doing? Like, you see any decisions yet? Did they mail it and everything?" He's like, "Did you check the online portal?" And I was like, I couldn't get into the online portal. So the decision came out, but I couldn't get into the online portal for whatever. I forgot my password. I couldn't reset it. And I was like, "No, I can't get into the portal." He goes, "Damn." He's like, "Are you serious?" And I was like, "Yeah, like, I don't know. Like, I can't get in." He goes, "Oh," he's like, "Well," he's like, "I know, like, do you want me to tell you?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, please, like, I'd love to know." And he goes, "Well, I'm sorry, man, we didn't get you in." And I was like, I like remember my fucking heart dropped. I was in like I was in like the boys' bathroom. My heart like sank, and I was just so devastated. And I was like, I was like, dang. I was like, "Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, coach. I wish you the best, and thank you again." And he was like, wait. He's like, "You're serious? You're not fucking with me?" And I was like, "What?" He goes, "You really don't know?" And I was like, "No." He goes, "Oh man." He's like, "I'm sorry." He's like, "It's an April Fool's joke. I thought you were trying to pull one on me." He's like, "No, you got in, man. You got in." I remember I was like, "Are you?" I was like, I had no idea what to do. I was like, "Are you fucking with me still? Like, is this real?" He goes, "No, you're good, man. You got in." He goes, he's like, "I'm sorry. I thought you were fucking with me." I was like, "No, you asshole." And that was when I got my first taste of Tonelli. He was a great guy, and I remember I went home. I didn't even go back to class. I just went home. I went home and I waited for my dad to get home. He usually got home around like 2:30 because he goes into work at like 4:30. But I remember he got home and I told him, and it was, he was just so excited. And my mom came home, and it was great. It was a great time. But yeah, it was a real interesting application process for me. I was a preferred walk on. I didn't have a spot, so I didn't really have the leeway that some of the guys had. So it was academic merit, a lot of it, and then just a little bit of admissions, watching out for my application. But yeah, I was borderline going to community college before I was going to Columbia, and it was a late acceptance, and it was the last school I applied to. I mean, like 24 hours before the buzzer. It was, and they had told me they weren't going to recruit me. So it's just, that's one of those things too, where it's like they weren't going to recruit me, and I think it speaks to what I said before, where it was okay. I put my head down and I grinded, and I outperformed at Beast of the East, and got put back on their radar and threw up a half court shot and hit it. But
Things
that's one
just
of those things.
aligned.
You just gotta put your head down and grind sometimes. That's like, I think it's a good example of it. You can't sulk. You can't sulk in defeat. You just gotta get up and keep moving.
Well, things were aligning for you, man. You were doing something right. You were
Dude,
committed.
I did. Yeah, really. The universe worked out for me on that one, and I had that outlook. I love, one of my favorite quotes is one of my favorite quotes. It's from a stupid movie, but it's the universe is conspiring to make me happy. If you believe that and you go through life with that attitude, it puts a little brighter side on everything that happens. You got to be a reverse paranoiac.
Yeah, 100%, dude. That's a great quote.
Yeah.
All right. So when you were you shuffled on to, or you got onto Columbia, and dude, you're an absolute hammer. You're a dog. You're committed. You're working through this whole progression to define yourself. And like you said, the universe was just aligning for you.
Yeah.
When you walked on the team as a recruit, obviously later down the road, you really set precedent at both Columbia and Drexel. But what was your mindset like going into that room? And what was the intention and expectation you held for yourself in order to leave an impact and get the most out of those programs? Especially, let's start off with Columbia first. Or
Yeah. So
Columbia.
going into that room, man. Like I said, I'm not a highly touted recruit, and there were definitely some highly touted ones in that room. That year I came on, we had three seniors that were, already three-time NCAA qualifiers. They were really going for their All-American push. And going into that room, honestly, originally I had like a little bitch's mindset. I was like going into that room to like survive. I didn't know if I was cut out for college wrestling yet, honestly. And I remember just wrestling in there. I didn't have my style of wrestling is I didn't score a lot of points, and I was very defensive minded. And I actually think it worked for me getting into that room because I think my defense was at least pretty decent. I was wrestling with some of the college guys, and I was like, like, okay, like I can hold off some of their attacks. Like I can do this. And then it became like a slow, like mind progression, in my head of like, wait, I belong here. I can do this. I can do this. I can do this. And it just kind of built up, built up, built up until I got to my first tournament. My first tournament, my opening match, I wrestled Frank Mattias, who was,
Oof.
UPenn All American, and he beat the balls off me. I mean, like, I hadn't been I hadn't been bitched that hard since maybe seventh grade when I didn't place in states. I mean, it was like one of those where I was like, fuck. I saw him being an All American. I kind of saw the mountain in front of me that I had to climb. Like that disparage between skill level and everything. I was like, it was intimidating at seeing it how much work I had cut out for me. And I went back to the room, and I think it was discouragement at first for sure. But I think Tonelli's a great coach, and he's great at trying to make you believe. It's tough because it's his way or the highway. Don't get me wrong, but if you become one of his guys, like he can help make you believe that like it can be done, and you just have to take the steps to do it. But yeah, I mean, first coming in there, my outlook wasn't that strong. And then as time went on, I spent a lot of time with the seniors my freshman year, and it was, Ty White, Marcus Scheidel, Garrett Ryan, great guys, great guys, 4-time NCAA qualifiers. And, it didn't never panned out for them at nationals. And I guess I also realized, again, sadly, nothing against them, but to be like a 4-time national qualifier and never place is interesting. It's one of those things where it's not tough to do, and it's not a knock on them, but it begs the question is like, what were they doing to improve themselves year over year? Was it like just guys getting that much better than them at the tournament every year, or were they not doing the right things? So that was like kind of a thought I had, and I wanted to replicate what they did, but then I wanted to do it better because I wanted to All American, and those guys were phenomenal wrestlers for sure. But they like to have their fun too, which is not a knock on anybody. But if you wanna be successful and dial in, it's those are some things you got to do. Like rolling into my sophomore year, I guess we had a new coach on the staff. Actually, this guy Kyle Massey, who's division heavyweight All American for Wisconsin. He was a great friend with Tonelli, And I mean, I absolutely hit it off with this dude. Like one of my favorite coaches I've ever had. And I only had him as a coach for 4 years, or yeah, 4 years total. But I mean, this was the best dude ever. I'll be in Kyle Massey's corner forever. He's at University of Chattanooga now. He's the head assistant there. He's the man. Like, I love that guy. I miss that guy every day. And I think he just we hit it off, and he understood me as a wrestler. Like he really did. And I think that spelled huge improvement for me in my mental and in my wrestling, because he would do one-on-ones with me once a week at least. And I'd wrestle him in practice. I mean, this dude was like 240 and he could move, flexible. He could do full splits, everything. I remember first time I wrestled him, I was on top and I went to go lock a cradle. And I mean, this guy's head folded to his knee and I slid right off, like trying to lock like a cradle on the side. His head folded to his knee. I slid right off. And I was like, what the fuck? Like, who is this dude? Like, what a freak wrestler. This guy's 240 and he can, literally bend his leg behind his head. And, just I talked to him all the time, and he was very big on the mental health of wrestling. And I started doing, sports psychology stuff and all of that. And, that was when I really started to find improvement. My sophomore year, I was 184 every year, but my sophomore year, I actually, I almost made a run at EIWAs. I was like a 13th seed at EIWAs. I didn't have like a great season, but I believed in myself going into EIWAs, and I took eighth at EIWAs, but I lost to the American kid in that consolation bracket. But top six made it to NCAAs that year, so I was a few points away from qualifying for NCAAs as a sophomore on a season that really wasn't anything special. I was 13th out of 16 at the time, for EIWAs. I shouldn't have even, been placing, but, I found myself a couple points away, and that was where I really did lock in those last 2 weeks before EIWAs. And I had tried for the whole season, but, locking in there, and you can see, you just see glimpses of possibility. That's like all it was. And then I was fortunate enough to roll into, I got asked to take a gap year, which is like an Ivy League version of a red shirt. You just have to unenroll from school and do that. I got asked to take a gap year, and I got to take it with, two of my best friends, Larry Casoy and Dan Fungaro. We lived in Hoboken together, and we had a phenomenal time wrestling, doing all that stuff. I got to travel to Dagestan, Russia for a month and, just wrestle over there. It was in Makhachkala and Casa Varut, which, those are once in a lifetime, if not less, of an experience. I don't even think we might not be able to get into Dagestan for the next 10 years as an American, who knows? So it was a really cool experience. It showed me the other side. It was my first time out of the country. It showed me the other side of the world. And it showed me kind of the poverty as well, opened up your horizons there. And I came back and, went through another year of college wrestling, and I started to kind of hit my stride. I had some great wins on my gap year. I beat some good dudes, but unfortunately, we rolled right into that pandemic year, man. COVID, what a setback that was. I actually think COVID did way more damage than help to me. It sucked because so I rolled in from my gap year. And so I wasn't really doing any I was doing opens and stuff, but I didn't have any real matches or on, like that, big competitions, with a crowd or anything like that. And, we rolled into COVID, and, another summer went. And then sadly that was, Ivy League schools announced that they were going to have no athletics whatsoever and nobody on campus. So it was real unfortunate. I lost a whole year of college and competing and everything. And we came back what would be my senior year then. And I did the math. I want to say it was I hadn't wrestled in 656 days or something. I hadn't wrestled a real college match from my gap year to the COVID year to coming back of November, whatever. It was 656 days since I wrestled an actual college match. And I mean, that's it sucks because that's 656 days of just, like that's of just looking forward to nothing. Like every day I rest, and I lived in Hoboken. I did every practice, every weekend thing, every Metcon, all of it. And it was like 656 days of just, putting your head down and grind because there was nothing to look forward to. I didn't get to showcase my skills on like a big stage or do it in a big tournament, even on my gap year, or, get to do it in a match and, wrestle with my buddies for my team. So it was tough. It got really tough during that gap in COVID year. And I made some decisions that probably, maybe set me back a little bit, like at the time, just goofing off, doing the bad things, getting involved in the wrong things. But it was hard. It was hard to stay focused at that point, man. I mean, that's miserable. Like imagine wrestling every day and just literally getting nothing, like, wrestling the same people every day, getting to do nothing, showing nothing for it. But came back for my senior year, and I was, blessed and happy that I got called to be a captain that year. It was awesome. It was probably one of my bigger accomplishments in my career. There was being able to work my way up from captain. Being a preferred walk on. I took a lot of pride in that, and I really did. And then just rolling into my senior year. Unfortunate. I herniated 2 discs in my neck on like literally the first week of practice in like October, and then just struggled with that for a large portion of the season. I missed like the first 2 months. I didn't get back until January because I got a couple cortisone shots and an epidural, and went through the season, just trying to wrestle through it, all that stuff. And I got to EIWAs, and damn, who did I lose to? Got to EIWAs after trying to put in as much as I could, a full year's work of trying to make my dream of at least qualifying for nationals come true. And it was just John Lowe. That was right. I lost to John Lowe.
Cornell kid.
Yeah, the Cornell kid. I lost to John Lowe, and then then I lost to BMAC. I lost to BMAC in the riding time extension overtime. I lost by like 5 seconds. And I only like 4 qualified for nationals that year. So I lost in the consolation, the 7th, 8th consolation again. And it was just, devastating. It was really devastating. It was just, I just wanted to qualify for nationals at that point. And, to not see that dream come true is disappointing. I was a little broken by that. I took 7th at EIWAs that year, and, I was fully on like my career's over train. I'm done. I'm it is what it is. I'm finished with wrestling. And, I guess I still went to practices, honestly, even after EIWAs and nationals. I still went to their like to their like late March and April practices and stuff after spring break, and I was still lifting. And, I guess it just got to a point where I realized I was like, damn, like I think I still have a little bit left in the tank, so entered the transfer portal. I had a lot of, again, D3 schools like looking for me because really I didn't have any credentials. I placed at EIWAs twice to that point, but, didn't qualify for nationals, didn't really have any big wins. And the guy that reached out to me is CJ LaFragola, baby, who I actually had a barn burner of a match with in my sophomore year. CJ's like a 3-time qualifier, and I lost to him in overtime when I was a sophomore at Brown. But he reached out to me, dude, and I mean, Drexel couldn't have been a better fit. I had you and Mickey, I had Evan. We had hung out at EIWAs on my gap year. I hung out with pretty much the Drexel team, and I was like, these dudes are all right, man. Like these are a bunch of good dudes. These are guys that want to brawl and have fun, and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty in some blue collar work. And CJ reached out, and they had a need. You guys had a need at 184, and I got to meet with Az, and it was going to be one of those things where for me, again, it sucks, but money was always going to be an impact in my life. It's just the way it was, and the money had to work. And I was fortunate enough; it worked out. I got to come to Drexel, and dude, I had the best year of my life. I had the best living situation. I fully committed. School was great. I had the best guys around me. I got to go I got to go on walks and talk with, the Sean O'Malley every day to keep my mind right, keep me focused, keep me tenacious, and I had great guys, and Evan Barzak, who another guy who just lives a regimented lifestyle. I think I picked a lot up from him in that aspect, and then I just dialed in on everything else. I dialed in on my diet, dialed in on my workouts. I mean, dude, you were the best partner ever. I mean, we fucking went to war every day at practice. There were times where I wanted to fucking punch you in the face during live, dude. But it was so great. It was the best. It really is. I'll tell everybody. I think in terms of a 365-day span, I would say from like June of 2023, when I had decided I was going to go to Drexel and, did the visits and spent the 2 weeks down there in July and August. So from July to, this past July when I moved out of Philly, I would say that was the best 365 days of my life, man. I had so much fun, and I did all the right things, and I worked my ass off, and it was great. How hard I worked, and for me to say that that's like the best time of my life is, I think that says a lot, because it was not easy. It wasn't an easy time of my life. That was hard. That was like some of the hardest things I've ever done. But I wouldn't trade that for the world, dude. I had the best I had the best year ever. That was so much fun, man. And it was just great. Everything clicked. That was the biggest the universe ever worked out for me, man. Picked up some great
Yeah,
things
well,
from great people.
well, happiness is simply observing what's happening. Like, that's what the word happiness is derived from, what's happening. And you went from being confronted with these shitstorms of weird situations with COVID and the gap year, and having to confront that negative feedback loop from hell and the contradiction. What do I want to do with myself? And what am I working towards? What's the purpose of me constantly training and constantly figuring myself out? What's next? That was the big question, right? Is figuring
Yeah.
out what's next for me. Like,
Yeah.
you're hunkering down on a crazy academic schedule with Columbia, and you're excelling at the highest level. You did economics, right?
Yeah.
At
Financial
Columbia?
economics major. Yep.
Financial economics, you're managing financial economics, which is one of the hardest programs in the country, all right, at Columbia. And then on top of it, training with an intention to get back on the mat, but that opportunity being so far away, or not even knowing when the opportunity is going to line up. And then
Yep.
you finally have the opportunity to wrestle, and it's a hard pill to swallow, because you had 2 years taken away from you. It's
Yeah.
hard to get back on the mat, or hard to get back into that I need to do this mode, when there's such a lapse of what's going on, and there's that
Yeah.
like that continuous frame of what are we working towards. And
Yeah.
then when you
Yeah.
when you jumped over to Drexel, man, like, we've known each other since what, we were like in fourth grade, fifth grade,
Has to be.
since we were like babies, dude. Since we were both short, fat kids, we were rubbing
Yeah.
bellies together. That's what it was.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
But that relationship we had together, like, especially with Mickey and Barzak and Parker, I feel like that final year, especially from my own personal circumstance, having that core group of guys, having that foundation of people, really, what do they say? You are the 5 people you surround yourself with.
Yeah.
And I felt like our core group of guys were people who wanted to define what a winner was. We wanted
Yeah.
to be fucking great, no matter the area. And that kind of elevated all of us to set that new standard for what it meant to be great. And going through that transition, what were the principles that you realized, that you had to live through in order to elevate yourself to that national standing? Like, you went from that 2-year gap, you wrestled that last year, had disappointment, you realized that you wanted to get back into wrestling, and then once you come to Drexel, you had a phenomenal season, knocked off multiple nationally ranked guys, and your performance just kept compounding and compounding, and things, your universe was aligning through the commitment and work ethic you had.
Yeah.
What were the principles that you had to hunker down on, or realized that this is my time, this is what I'm meant, this is what I'm here for?
Yeah. I think one of the biggest principles is like you don't get like a cheat day, like that. There's just like a quote. I just like to quote that. Like you don't get, you don't, if you're putting all this hard work in towards a goal, you don't get the luxury of, of giving like a setback. Like, like you don't have the luxury of giving a setback day. Like it shouldn't be like six steps forward, one step back. It should be six steps forward, another step forward. Like, it's just like you should never just, don't give yourself luxuries until the goal's done, until what you want is accomplished. I think that was one of the biggest ones. And then another one was just the regimented lifestyle, man. People hate monotony, but I think there's comfort in monotony. I think, it's monotony sucks, but in certain aspects, it's great. I woke up like monotony in my diet. I ate the same thing every day. I ate the same thing every day. Didn't deviate from the foods I ate. And I was a vegetarian for I was a vegetarian for the year. I had to lose 30 pounds to get to 184. I was fat as hell coming into the season. I mean, once the season goes down, like I didn't have the luxury of giving myself a cheat day. I didn't. I wanted to make sure my weight was always in check. I never saw above 190 on the scale. 180. I never saw anything in the 190s. I was always 189 or below whenever I stepped on the scale to check my weight. It was just one of those things where those principles are like, they have to be done. You have to be fully committed. You can't take lapses in judgment and little minor setbacks because you earned it. No, you didn't earn it until the goal's done. So that was one of the biggest things I took from that year. And I also took I think really I focused on the mental health aspect of it last year. I mean, talking to you all the time, I didn't realize how big it was, in terms of seeing wrestling success. I think just going on walks and talking to you was like mini therapy sessions, like during the week. Like when the monotony started to get to me, we'd walk for fucking an hour around and just talk. Or I think like other things, like reading things that have nothing to do with what I'm doing at the moment. I think that's huge. I actually do that now still. I love to read, you gave me some economics books like Liar's Poker, all that. I love reading those books, but every now and then I have to mix in something fictional or something that I enjoy reading, because you need to just deviate a little bit, from the monotony. Monotony is great, but you need to deviate, in aspects that you can, I'm not deviating from my diet. I'm not, oh, I don't want to eat this today, I'm just going to do McDonald's. No, because that being a structured diet was a core support principle to my goal. Reading was ended up being important to my goal, but that wasn't going to absolutely inevitably affect the outcome. Eating a meal like McDonald's could affect the outcome. Skipping a day at practice, that could affect the outcome. Half-assing a practice, that could affect the outcome. I had to be dialed in every single day, because everyone else that wanted to achieve my goal, who had the same goal in mind, was doing the same thing. And I'll be damned if I get passed up by some other schmuck who thinks he can do what I can do. And I think I took those things really, really to heart last year. I don't think we fucked around once. I don't think. I'm trying to think. I think maybe on New Year's I had maybe a drink or two. I didn't even drink on New Year's Eve. I think I maybe had a tequila soda, and maybe that. And I remember I was even mad that I did that. But beyond that, I mean, we didn't fuck around in any aspect. I was doing multiple workouts every day. I think I logged at least 2 workouts every day. Maybe on Sunday I only did one. Maybe on Sunday I just did a run. You know, but other than that, or days we competed, I just competed. But even still, we had our warm up. We had our warm up before our weigh in, so fuck it, it counted as 2. But it was just that those things were what really clicked. You can't deviate off of the path to your goal. I'm not saying there's only one path to get to your goal, but you can't move backwards in any of those paths. You can move, you can snake on that path. You can move left, right, you can do any of that stuff. You can take a different route, but as long as you're going forward, you just can't go back. And I don't think I think that whole year, I don't think I took a step back. And I think that was a big, big thing. Years past, years prior, I'd do the right things and then I'd take a step back. I'd do the right things and then I'd take a step back. You can't do that. I think that's huge. If you want to be successful, it's always got to be moving forward toward that goal. Yeah, you have to take that in stride always.
No, I totally agree with that. And the one thing I recently started living through this quote a little bit, it's love your boredom or love your mundane routine. if you want to
Yeah.
switch it up. And like you said, we're all doing the same exact thing in our pursuit. We're going to the practices, we're eating right, we're trying to stay disciplined, be on a regimented diet to be the best. All right. But the colors that you mix into it, especially between your mind,
Yeah.
right, are the value adds that are going to increase your performance. Like we talked about, a simple thing like going on a walk and talking through our mental processes and figuring things out about ourselves and defining who we're trying to project ourselves to be built a lot of clarity. And that was the color for our life because our perceptions were different. Same exact thing in the room. We're all going through the same practice. We're all doing the same high crotches and single legs and takedowns, but it's how you're working through it. All right. You're doing it with intent. We would smack it when we would go live. We would beat the shit out of each other with our hand fight. All right.
Dude,
We
it
would
was
make
like
each other bleed and we'd get in. Yeah.
grizzly things
we,
going at it.
we get big with each other, but
Yeah.
there was always love on the table at the end of practice.
It was a respect thing.
We threw intent into practice. We
Yeah.
loved the routine. We loved the boredom and the mundane process of everything, but there was always color involved. And that was the value add. That was, I think, the biggest transition I saw with you. And then personally also is, especially when you stepped in the room. My last year of college was my best year of college because that was the only season I wrestled a full year.
Yeah.
Was hurt every other one or had shit going on every other one and showed up, wrestled with one side of my body, but you were a link in my chain. You were the link in my chain. You were my guy I was able to talk to every single day. We hashed out a lot of shit for clarity, which is awesome. So with those principles at play, I remember we had this one conversation. You were talking about your brother-in-law on a walk, and you said that his mindset was awesome. And you could rephrase it if I say it wrong, but you talked about how his intent with walking into a business meeting is making that dude feel like, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah.
All right. He is absolutely dominating every opportunity, every conversation, every entrance into a room. And he's radiating this energy that is just everyone is just like, what the fuck? Like, this dude's an absolute shark. This dude's a killer.
Yeah.
And we saw that on the mat with you. You set the fucking tone every single time you were there. Practice, even you had to go sit down and cook a meal. I'm fucking killing it. We had to have a conversation. I'm fucking killing it. School, I'm killing it. How are you able to roll over those principles into the coolest shit that you're doing right now? All right.
Yeah.
You stepped into the financial sector. You're going to be you are shredding it. You're killing it right now. How are you still living through those principles? What's the color you're adding to that mundane?
Yeah. So I'm a firm believer in, like, picking up things that other people do well, and just kind of like taking their value added and putting it into your own life. And I think my brother-in-law is like one of the best guys that I take stuff from. But he's it's like I said, his word, like, if he could sum up his life or what he wants to do in one word, is just dominate. Like, that guy literally uses that word till it's like, I don't even know. He just puts that in everything, and that's his goal, is to dominate. And like you said, like, dude, he goes into these business meetings, and he wants to go with other, like, ETF wholesalers. He wants them to walk out of the room and just like go. He wants them to go home to, like, their wives, go home to their kids, and just be like, I got fucking dominated today in the office. Like, this dude absolutely, like, he wants to leave a lasting impact like that. And it's just like, it's awesome. It's awesome to see someone take that into work. And, I guess I even realized that more from him, is like that I can take these things I learned from wrestling and bring it into work, man. You just got to be a dog, you have to be a dog. You've got to, like, I work for First Trust Portfolios, portfolio management. I work in an ETF sector for us. And it's just like, you have to go and just dominate. You have to know your product. That would be like my it sucks, but comparing it to wrestling, but my practice now is like, is going over products and knowing product, and then I have to know what's going on in the market world right now, because I have to know which product is going to best fit for someone's portfolio, and it's my practice now has become, CNBC, and I read a bunch of, I read a bunch of asset management books, and then it's knowing our product that we have on the table here. And that's like, the better that, the more I can practice and get those products down, the more I can go and, during my match day or during, my wholesaling events or my calls, I can go and fucking put on a performance and make these advisors think like, well, maybe this guy's onto something. Maybe there is a product here. And then I get that second meeting, that second match, and I'm pushing product down their throat, man. I'm going in there with a purpose. I'm going in there to make you part of First Trust. I'm going in there to put First Trust product in your portfolio. And that's just the way you have to look at things. You got to make it exciting. You got to make it a competition. I mean, this guy's like trying to fend me off, and I'm just on the attack. That's just the way it is, man. There's 30 seconds left, and I'm down by one all the time.
100%. And there's this one quote, Carl Jung, the psychologist
Yeah.
or psychoanalyst, he has this one quote, and it's like, the world will ask you who you are. And if you don't know, the world will tell you. And that resonated with me a bunch. But what it seems like is you're not letting the world define you. You're living through that conviction your brother that you grasped from your brother-in-law. And you're like,
Yeah.
I'm showing up and fucking dominating every second. All right.
Yeah.
Your systems for your workday or your practice to show up for match time is like, we go into a practice, I'm working on my single leg. Your single leg is one aspect of the market. And then
Mhm.
there's 50 different systems associated with your single leg. There's a ton of different ways to finish your single leg. So what you
Mhm.
do is you allocate your time to that finish. And then when it comes time for mat day, you have a beautiful single leg. I'm using
Mhm.
single leg because that was your go-to college takedown too. Good, a filthy single.
Thank you. Appreciate
But
that.
that's like the system. I felt like with wrestling is you see the application through practice, and every single day you're, like you said, 6 steps forward, one more step forward.
Yeah.
And that's the outlook every single day. You're going into practice with work, and you're hunkering down on the system that's going to get you ready for match time. So to wrap this thing up a little bit, you want to define what's on your plate next. What are you working towards? What is the highest projection of Brian Bonino, the badass you are right now? Where are you going? What are you doing? What's your plan?
All right, man. I love I feel like I'm one of those, I love this one quote too, is just, I only pull it off how I do it, which it makes no sense, but I think it's such a great quote, man. It's just, it only happens the way you do it. And right now, I'm doing exactly what I said before. I'm putting my head down to the grindstone, and I'm not looking back. I'm just going forward. For now, I work on our eastern region, with our ETFs, and I'm wholesaling that aspect. And my ultimate goal here is I want to make this a career. I don't. I think this is a great company. I like where I'm at a lot. I think there's a lot of room for improvement, and I think there's a lot of room to make a lot of money. And that's sadly that's my goal, man. Some people don't like that. People are money oriented, and I would say I'm money hungry, but I don't know, man. It's just I want to swallow up the world one day. That's my plan. So I'm trying to right now head to the grindstone. I'd love to be at this company for long term, and I'd love to get to do external stuff. To be on the outside, to be traveling and selling and doing my thing there, and just growing a region, growing a territory, and growing a portfolio. And I'd love to make partner at the firm. One day that would be the goal. It's nice. It's a private company, so there's no holdbacks on how they have to make their partners. And it's an earned quality. It's like being a captain. You can get there. It's not impossible. You can do it. You just got to do the right things, and you just got to keep doing them all the time, and just keep growing and keep being successful. So that's what I want to do. And then beyond that, I want to get involved in some other ventures. I don't know what yet, to be honest, but I don't. This isn't going to be my sole stream of income. I want to get involved in some other things. I want to start. I'd love to be able to, when I want to step away from this, I'd love to be able to have, something that's all mine, not to fall back on, but to put my full effort in on that again. So whatever it is I decide to do with, if it's a company I want to open, or if it's something I'm invested in, um, I want to, when I'm done here, I want to take over and grow that and make that my own. I don't think I'll ever want to sit back on my ass. I don't think that's the way I'm going to be. Retiring would be nice, but I feel like that's how people waste away. That's it. I want to keep going.
Yeah. Well, purpose is fuel, man. And if you keep working towards something, you're just going to be a freaking jet in one direction.
That's it.
I appreciate you, B. You're the
Oh
man.
man, I appreciate you. Are you kidding me? Thank you so much for having me, dude. This was fun. I hope we get to do this again.
Definitely. We'll do it soon.
Yeah.